Welcome to the Susan Brender Show. It's all about you. Featuring shows on health and wellness, the performing arts, politics, and people who inspire you to be your very best. And now, here's Susan Brender.
I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show. Today, my guest is a repeated guest who was so wonderful that I said to him, I want to have you back on my show. And sure enough, I'm fortunate enough to have him here. Joshua Schmude is the author of Reverse Speech in Theory and Practice, How to Use Your Unconscious Mind to Predict the Outcome of Future Events, and the founder of Lionheart Publishing Company. My other guest is Emily Morgan, who is a slightly sarcastic, coffee-loving author, awkwardly stumbling through life, as she says, strategically avoiding death reapers. Oh, we got to talk about that. And jumping first into the line for the Shadowhunter Academy. She's motivated by fear of being average and especially loves being underestimated. You know, we're going to talk about how much you love reading. We're going to talk about the color purple, which is a black belt in Shotokan Karate, and will totally steal your pen when you're not looking. And that's our other guest, Emily Morgan. So welcome, Josh and Emily, to the Susan Brender Show, and we've got lots to discuss.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate you having me back on.
And I'm so pleased that you're here, Emily, too, because it's going to make this show really very interesting. You know, one of the things that is really important for our audience to know, Josh, is that there are publishing companies out there that really support their authors. And I have a suspicion that you're one of them. And I'd like to find out how you get started in publishing, and also what people have to do in order to get their books published.
Well, one thing I want to start off saying is that there's a lot of dishonesty and con artistry on the internet. And that's just to get, it's clickbait. It's just to get people to click. I've noticed, you know, certain authors saying how I sold 20,000 copies in the first week with no proof, no sales statistic, just to get clicks. And then when you click on the video, the video, it doesn't really explain anything. You can separate the real from the fake pretty quickly by just seeing what they're saying. My expanded distribution course, 5-hour course, it's available online for free right now, so anybody can check it out. Go to udemy.com and type in expanded distribution. And that gets into a lot of key elements. One thing, a misconception about publishers is that a lot of authors think publishers will help with the marketing and everything else, and that's just simply not true. Typically, authors will have to hire a publicist to do that. Now, the bigger publishers, the more well-known ones that are a bit harder to get your book published through, they do have a team of publicists and stuff like that that can help authors, but the authors pay for it. So there's a big misconception about the publishing industry in general, and this idea that a publisher is going to help the authors sell their books. The publisher is going to give you a small advance, and then they're going to take a certain percentage of the royalties. And what's going to happen basically is they're not going to help you with anything else. They'll distribute it, but even the distribution will be half-hearted. Handling my own distribution, there's literally thousands of different distributors all over the world, and it's very unlikely that publishers will use some of the niche distributors. It's more likely that they will use the more well-known, bigger distributors. And there's nothing wrong with that, but especially with nonfiction, you really want to find niche markets. You know, people think that they need to target a broad audience when they're selling something, and that's not true. What you need to target is a niche market. That's how you're going to be successful, not targeting everybody in a general sense, but targeting a specific market. Like, I want to target Jungian psychologists, or I want to target reverse speech analysts, or I want to target, theosophists, whatever. But you really want to hone your books and your marketing strategy to a particular niche market. With fiction authors, it's a little different. With fiction authors, what I've noticed that they have to do to get in the news, get on shows, is they need to develop some sort of media stunt, if you will, or media. Edward Bernays had the perfect name for it, but basically it's propaganda. You're developing a staged media event, and by that I mean, author Emily Morgan helps battered women teach battered women how to learn publishing. You know what I'm saying? Stuff like that, because that's what's going to make headlines, is giving back to the community. Whereas nonfiction, it's more about the subject matter of the book. So there's a different twist, but the overall principles are the same. People think success happens instantly, and that's not how success happens. It builds gradually over time. You plant a seed, and if you don't water it, if you don't nurture it, you get what you put in. You know what I'm saying? People with millions of views or artists, they've been doing that for years before they reach that stage. You know, and that's what most people don't understand. When you start like everybody else with nothing. You know what I'm saying? And then you got to make something happen. And what I've learned, one key thing I've learned, people are so focused on customers and selling their books, you know, traditionally to customers. They don't think about the libraries. That there is over 100,000 libraries in the United States alone. I've already sold my book to a few of them. But these libraries get money from the state to buy your books. I mean, it's $500,000 to $1 million right there if you just pick up the phone and call these libraries. Speak with the acquisition department. And this is how I know when they're saying I sold 20,000 copies in the first week, that's a bunch of BS. Because the majority of your sales when you're first starting out are typically going to come from libraries because they're the easiest to sell to. And they're going to pay double the price. You know, my ebook goes for $20 to a library where it's only $10 in the retail market. So I get into that in my expanded distribution. But me and Emily have known each other for a year, and Emily kind of got, you know, she went through a traditional publisher, and she can tell you her own experiences with that. But I think that I kind of helped her see a better way. And, you know, not only will she keep more money from her royalty sales, but she'll have more control over her distribution, over her marketing, over what she can write. You know, she's not having to appease a publisher, you know what I'm saying, in order for them to publish. And really, they give you a meager advance anyway. They give you a meager, you know, unless you're a well-known author, your advance is not going to be much. You know, you're better off doing it yourself.
You know what, Josh? I'm going to interrupt you just because I think we need our audience to know a little bit about Emily. And oh, it's okay. Yeah, you're giving our audience and the people who want to publish a very important piece of advice, and I think this is what our show's about. It's about education and information, and people, you know, there's so many people around the world are writing, and they just keep their fingers crossed that they could sell even a few books, no less sell, you know, thousands of books. But Emily, how did you get to meet Josh, and what are you doing? Explain to our audience a little bit about who is the real Emily.
Well, I met Josh, I think it was on the Shaper app.
Sharper, yep.
Yep. So we met there because
It's been over a year, Emily. Isn't that crazy? We've known each other for more than a year. That's crazy. Time flies.
It is pretty crazy. Hey, I wouldn't change it for anything, that's for sure. You definitely changed my life. So, we met on this app. I was learning how to network, and originally I got on there because I ended up changing career paths. I originally got my degree in marketing and communications, and then I realized that I really love writing instead, and kind of triggered me writing a book, and then really finding out where my passion lies. And that's how we just kind of stumbled across it, ended up having a conversation, and then started talking about his business and publishing, and it opened my eyes to a lot of stuff because I was kind of in the process of researching new publishing companies as well, because I currently went through one, and it was horrible. It was the worst. So
tell her what they charged you, Emily. They charged Emily. They didn't give her an advance. They charged her.
No. Yeah, they charged me. So in order to get my book published, I think it was about at least $900 to $1,000, and that was
crazy.
The deal that they were having for the time. And then on top of that, I was dumb enough to look into marketing, and I'm like, at hindsight, I'm a marketing person. I can do this myself. I don't need to spend money. So hindsight, it was kind of dumb, but I mean, it literally did nothing. And so I spent a bunch of money, and it was just wasted on nothing. So
hey, but you know what? It's not a mistake if you learn something from it, and you learned a valuable lesson right there. It's a lot of fakery, con artistry, hustling, and people don't get it, but
That's right. And hindsight is 20/20. Just to keep that in mind. Now, Emily, Shadowhunter Academy. What is Shadowhunter Academy?
Well, it's actually I love books, so I am a huge fiction person. So I don't know if anybody's ever heard of it, but their book's called The Mortal Instruments, and they're by Cassandra Clare, and it's the Shadowhunter Academy. So they fight evil, and they are kind of like descendants of angels and things like that. So it's one of those action-packed series that kind of changes your life. They just made a TV show out of it and ended their season. So it's just one of those authors that really inspires me to continue to write and really reiterate my passion.
Who do you gear your audience after? Is it young people? Is it older people? Who wants to know a little bit about some of the books and some of the things that you're involved in, like the Celestial Cities City series, which is sparked by, as you call it, the roast pig. Who's your audience?
It is young adult. So, yep, I tend to do young adult, 18 above, but you never know where I gear everybody to.
Do you have a message in any of your books or anything that you're involved in? Is there a specific point that you want to get across? Are you touching upon different issues that young people are going through right now? I mean, we're talking about, in fact, I heard this statistic yesterday, which was mind-boggling and absolutely horrendous, which is that there are more young people between the ages, believe it or not, 8 and 25, who are committing suicide, which is shocking. And I want to know whether anything that you're writing gives people the hope, the feeling that they could get to do something special. So what would you say about that?
Well, I had a lot of inspiration actually behind The Guardian, whether it was between, I had a friend whose mom passed away from cancer, which is a big tie within this too. So it's not directly related to myself, but it's a big deal to me because we were so close. I was close with her mom, and it was just such a tragic thing. But the themes within the book are centered around always having courage, no matter what you're doing, no matter who you're coming in contact with, whether it's a new challenge, adventure, anything, it doesn't matter. As long as you have just the courage to step up and face whatever is in front of you, is the main point. I think that relates to everybody. So.
Yeah. And Susan, one thing I was going to say with what Emily said, it's funny because the best art comes through tragedy. My book came about through a tragic event. Emily's book came about through a tragic event. The best music, the best literature, the best movies, it comes about through tragedy. And people have this idea that life is supposed to be happy, and that if their life isn't quote unquote happy, it's not worth living. But they don't understand that you need this tragedy, you need this conflict to grow. And once you start seeing that, then you will understand that, sometimes things get bad, but it's leading you on to your greater destiny. You know what I'm saying? And it's sad that these kids are committing suicide like that, but I think one of the underlying reasons is they've lost touch with the myth. And what I mean by that is the spirituality behind the symbols themselves contained in these religious myths have been forgotten and lost, and the idea of Christ has become a perfect thing outside of you that you could never adhere to because he's so perfect and you're so imperfect. So when you place God outside of you like that and make it distant and you just have faith in this symbol, then you forget about the God within yourself and the divine spark in your own soul. And, ultimately that's the thing, that's the inner voice that'll get you through any tragedy and actually explain why this tragedy is happening. All you got to do is just quiet yourself and listen to it. We call it conscious, Holy Spirit, whatever, inner voice, Atman. There are different names for it, but we all have it. Some people choose to listen to it. Other people choose to ignore it, and those are usually the people that become neurotic and, end up doing those types of things.
Spoken a little bit about this before, but how did you develop this desire to actually look inside yourself and be, if I'm not mistaken, it sounds like you're a very spiritual person with a lot of religiosity in your life that takes you to a part of you which makes you extremely happy. So give our audience a little understanding of Joshua Schmude again, because I think that when you talk, I could hear the passion in your voice and the understanding that life is not easy, but you can get through it with a lot of happiness.
Well, in my next book, I'm going to go into greater detail about this and give pictures of my dreams. But I had a series of 3 dreams that had a profound impact on my life. The first one occurred in childhood. The next one occurred when I was 14 in adolescence, and it was that dream that actually revealed my entire destiny to me through symbols. I didn't understand the meaning of these symbols until I got older. But once I reached my late 20s, it all started clicking, especially after I went to prison. That's when everything really started clicking, and I was like, whoa, I understood that all this had to happen for a reason, and that reason was to lead me onto this path because like in most of the myths with Jonah and these prophets, they run from their destiny when that divine voice comes to them and says, this is what you're supposed to do. A lot of times it will scare them, especially at 14 years old, because you're thinking, how am I supposed to be able to do this? Like, I don't even know where to start. And, in the act of running from that destiny, you end up creating it, which I find pretty crazy. But Jung talks about that extensively. And I guess it was those dreams that led me on to this greater purpose, because to sum it up, I've seen in my dreams what most people won't see until after they die, I guess is the best way to put it. So having those types of experiences changes you whether you want it to or not. I realize that this life isn't it. I realize that death is not an escape. Death is actually a self-confrontation. So, you think you're leaving these worries and troubles behind when you die, but actually you're confronting yourself. That is when the self confronts the self. It's not a God that's judging you, but it's you judging yourself through your own life review, regardless of whatever religion you are. And the hell that is created is the hell we create for ourselves while we're here. People who've run from themselves their whole life will continue to run from themselves in the spiritual world and, be around other people just like them, and that is hell. It's not a hell that a tyrannical God sends you to for, touching yourself. It's actually a hell that we create for ourselves while we're here. And, there's nobody to blame but you. So there is no God you can place that blame on and say, this God's a tyrant. It's actually you. You have to own what you have prepared,
Emily, I'm just curious, listening to what Josh is saying right now, did the two of you sit down and talk about, each other and what your life was like and why, you went through the things that you did, and now that you're accomplishing things, what's in the future for you? Did you sit down and have that discussion with Josh?
Well, it's hard to say specifics because we've had a lot of in-depth conversation. So they've always been very insightful. So I feel like I need to record every one of them and then go back and re-listen to them, because they're just, I don't even have words for it, because whenever I talk to Josh, he always helps me look inside myself, and it's remarkable what comes out, and it's things that I didn't even think of. So it's just, whether it's stuff in the past that I didn't even think of, or things that haven't even happened yet. I mean, it just blows my mind. Like I'm at a loss for words whenever I do, because
what path are you on, Emily? I'm just curious. Are you on a new path since you started publishing and started being involved in all these different, I guess we'll call them, what should we call them? The Celestial series and all of those. These are TV things, are they not?
They will be eventually.
Great.
No wish. It's going to happen, Emily. It's going to happen.
Hey, well, when I have friends like you, I think I'm on the right path. That's for sure.
Oh, by the way, I was going to talk to you about that anyway. It's funny Susan brought that up. I've been thinking about that because I'm making another complete self-publishing master course, and I want to include those things for fiction authors. I was looking at how to do that, Emily, and actually it's not as difficult as most people think, but you'll probably want to start with a smaller production company. And then that production company might want an upfront cost, but typically they will pay you royalties from a script that either you create as the author, the book and script form, or they, draw inspiration from. Because producers of movies and documentary series, they're always looking for new ideas and new concepts, and they usually get them from fiction books. So, some of the best theories have come from fiction books. People don't really realize that, but they welcome authors to pitch their ideas because it could be a huge success. And I think her book is really great. I read it last year, and it deals with cancer and, like she said, having courage in the face of enormous adversity. It was very inspirational to read.
That's interesting that you brought up the whole notion of writing about cancer. There's been book after book after book about children who have experienced their family's cancer and what they went through. And many years ago, I just remember that I interviewed a young woman who spent every single day next to her mother's bedside, and what she did was she recorded a little bit about what the mother had to say. In fact, this was Lynn Redgrave, her daughter, who was the one who was telling me about it, and her mother was a fascinating woman from a fascinating family, and she would record it, and she would photograph her mother every single day just to see the progress that she made. Unfortunately, her mother didn't survive, but on the other hand, she had all these memories and all these really wonderful things, and she put it in a book. And I think that that's something that everyone should do, regardless of whether it's about cancer. It's always good to write about somebody who's led a fascinating life. Don't you agree, Emily, and don't you agree, Josh?
Yeah, definitely. I'm inspiring to a lot of people.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know, the thing is about fascinating lives, a lot of people, they just take. They're consumers. They never give back to society, and yet they expect to be rich and enormously successful. Rich people are rich because they have contributed back to society in some way, whether it's through books, through music, through movies, through new cures for diseases. This is how you're going to become wealthy. You're not going to become wealthy through earning from a job. It's not going to happen. You can make a great salary, but the salary is only as good as the job. If you really want a stable income, you need to start looking at what can you do to help mankind? What can you do to help your fellow brothers and sisters? And not only can you make money, but you can make an impact on the world. And I think that's what we all want subconsciously. Is we want to, as we get older, what is our legacy? You know, that's the question we start asking ourselves. What is my legacy? You know, what are people going to say when I'm gone? What have I done with my life? And those are hard questions to deal with if you haven't acted on anything.
You know, Josh and Emily, this is another thing that I'm really kind of curious about, and that is that when people write books, like the Harry Potter series, and I know, and I'm sure you can relate to this situation, you know, the author of that sat in a, if I'm not mistaken, in a coffee shop writing her book, never expecting what would come out of that. And look what happened. I mean, she probably has sold 1 billion books and all kinds of toys and all kinds of things. Do you think that most writers, young ones in particular, aspire to do that?
Definitely. I definitely do. I think that's huge. I just helped another one of my other friends who decided that she was going to start writing. I just met with her for coffee to help go over her book and her goals for that. So I think that's super inspiring for everybody. I think no matter whether you're writing or not.
Right. And, you know, one thing I've noticed with fiction writings, ideas that are going to actually happen in reality actually are written about in fiction works unconsciously by the author without them realizing it. And what I mean by that is we're all connected without really consciously realizing it. And what she wrote, the reason I think it was so successful is because it reintroduced the idea of the hero archetype magician, the hero magician archetype. And what I mean by that is the coming of a sort of mystery school again, where magic, well, I don't want to call it magic, I'd rather say theurgy, will be used to stop bad people and tyrants. This is how the Pythagoreans used the ancient sacred wisdom, was to stop tyrants and install new polities in different cities. This is Ian Bleekus goes into detail in his book on the Pythagorean life, but basically the Pythagorean sect was a sect of mystics that was using the sacred wisdom to spy on leaders and reveal their crimes and have them banished. And I'm serious. I mean, people, they think I'm crazy, but magic has historically been used to topple governments. But people don't understand that. They think you use magic to enrich yourself, and really that's the least effective way to use magic. The most effective way to use magic is to use it on things that are bigger than yourself. You see what I'm saying? Things that don't directly imply you, but actually imply the spiritual development of mankind as a whole. And once you have that idea when you approach the sacred wisdom, the possibilities are unlimited, because with the sacred wisdom, you have access to information that you're not going to have access to anywhere else, and that is the complete past, present, and future of the human race. The Pythagoreans knew what was going to happen before it happened. They were notorious for being able to predict the future, but they also knew much about the present. And their understanding of numbers is very different from our understanding of numbers. They understood numbers as a means to communicate with higher intelligences. The mathematics we have now that we're taught in school is actually considered the mathematics of the profane by these mystery schools. They were using mathematics to develop ritual equipment and stuff like that to contact higher intelligences. Whether these are within our minds or they're outside of us, I can't answer that. From my personal experiences, I think it's a little bit of both. Because I've seen things that, frankly, I didn't want to see, but I'm glad I saw, because now I know it exists, and, you know, I live my life accordingly. You know, I realize that I'm ultimately the one who has to answer for myself. And if I don't accomplish what I'm supposed to accomplish, I'm going to be stuck holding the bag with myself. I don't think people realize that, you know, it's you that will be your own judge, but not your ego. It's a deeper aspect of yourself, which I think Jung really touched on in his writings.
Yeah. You know, it sounds like, Josh, when you talk about where you're at the moment, that you judge your own self, and you are the master of your your destiny, and that is an important message for everybody to send. It's not the responsibility of others to make your life wonderful or make your life miserable. It's your responsibility to do whatever you think is important to lead a really good life, because life is short, isn't it? And, you know, Emily, you're a young woman, and I always like to give my guests the last word. There is something that you must want to say to our audience which will really make them think. And I think that's an important thing, to just give people an opportunity to spend a few moments in a very kind of traditional or light way. And that I'd love to know what you have to say about this. And let's start with Emily.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I 100% support everything that Josh says. That's one of the things that I'm always learning from everything that he's sharing. There's always something new that I'm picking up on. Even the Pythagorean thing, I had no idea, so I'm learning myself too. And I wholeheartedly support all of that. And honestly, it helps me reflect back on myself. I mean, a year ago when we first met and we even started talking about these things, I now reflect on myself and the things that I do and the possibilities that I have, and it's a lot of reflecting in order to get what you want or get what you need. And even when it comes to reflecting on dreams and the unconscious thought, and I think that's so huge that a lot of people don't think about it. People will wave off, oh, well, I just had a crazy dream last night. Well, what does it mean? What else is there to it? I mean, and now it's been a year that I constantly start thinking about stuff like that. It's like second nature now. So I think that's huge. I think people need to have their own courage to look and reflect on themselves, because humanity is so selfish that we need to do that. I think we need to reflect on ourselves first. And then I feel like that's when a lot of great things will happen and can come from that.
Fantastic. And Josh,
I agree.
What words of wisdom can you impart to our audience as well? Because needless to say, you've had an impact on Emily that sounds like it's wonderful, and I'm sure she's not the only one. So I'd like our audience to really get a little of your really wonderful words and inspiration. So please tell us what you think.
Okay, 2 key points. The first one deals with Pythagoras again. In his sect, before he introduced his initiates, his students, to the sacred wisdom, he imposed a 5-year rule of silence. And the reason he imposed that was to open a dialogue with their inner self, to stop focusing on all the material BS and, words, and start actually listening to your inner self. This was a necessary prerequisite before they were given the sacred wisdom. And Pythagoras understood the gravity of giving somebody the sacred wisdom who didn't have this connection with their inner self, because they can cause a lot of damage to themselves and to others. Magic in itself is not good or evil. It's neutral. It's how you use it. It's just like a gun. You can use a gun to protect people, or you can use a gun to hurt innocent people. It's not the gun that's good or evil. It's the person using it. The intentions behind that. So that's one thing. People need to open up that dialogue with their inner self and really start listening to what their inner self is saying. And they'll get the answers. They already have all the answers within them. The second thing I want to tell people, because there's this misconception that I've seen with a lot of people in life, and this is probably why they're committing suicide. They have this ideal, because, you have shows like Seventh Heaven, everything's all perfect, and, they strive to have a life of happiness, but what they don't understand is that we live in a world of opposites, night and day, conscious and unconscious, life and death. You must accept both equally. You cannot accept your happiness without also accepting your sadness. You must accept your moments of glory and your moments of tragedy equally. You must accept them equally, because they are both essential for your development and your growth as a human being. Do not flee from conflict or tragedy, because it is these things that make you a stronger person. Having to go to prison and go through all that stuff that I went through, it made me a very strong person, because now I know my own capabilities. Nobody can stop me if I have my mind set on something. No one. You know what I'm saying? The state or anybody else. If my mind's set on that, I'm going to do it. And everybody has that power. It's just people don't. They're taught from an early age, especially in school, that they don't. They're taught to look outside of themselves for the answers rather than within themselves. God never left us. The divine spark has been within us this whole time. And this is the reason Christianity spread so quickly. It was the Pentecost is a symbolic metaphor for inner experiences that were being experienced by the masses. This is why they were dying. They were dying because they would not worship the state as God. They would not sacrifice to the cult of the emperor. This is really a political thing. It didn't really have much to do with religion. The religious aspect was the mystical experiences that these people were having, these spontaneous experiences. And this is what led to the rise of Christianity so quickly. But of course, people don't understand that. What religion means is linking back. It comes from the Latin word religio. It means to link back when the divine, pneuma, incarnated in manner, divine breath incarnated in matter, and that happens through a prophet or through an avatar. So, it's a historical continuity that is happening over and over again, a eternal recurrence, as Nietzsche put it. And once you understand that, then you understand that the answers to the present lie in the past. But if you're never taught that in school, and you're taught that the ancients were stupid, they were superstitious, and we're at this pinnacle of technological, we're better than everybody else, then you're never going to understand that the problems we're facing now are the exact same problems they were facing back then. And Aristotle talks about it brilliantly in Politics, the book on politics, how tyrants stay in power. And this needs to be mandatory reading for all high school students. But unfortunately it was taken out. And so people get out of high school not knowing how to change anything. They don't know how the government works. They think they have no power. They think, that there's no answers, that these problems never existed before. But the answers to the present lie in the past. And that once you understand that, then you realize that you can do anything, man. You can do anything. It starts with cracking open a book and educating yourself. I mean, go to college, that's great. But you can learn much more just cracking open some nonfiction books and actually learning. Knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. That's the only thing that can change the circumstances of your life and give you the life that you want, is to educate yourself.
That's an amazing and inspirational discussion that you just had with us and our audience. The high holy days are coming up for the Jewish people, and I imagine that there is just one little tidbit of information or education, in a sense, that you can offer to the people who are going to celebrate their new year, and also the death of all the people from the Jewish faith, from the Holocaust, and from various other ways. So is there a little piece of advice that you would like to tell them?
Well, the Holocaust is horrible. There's no excuse for what happened with the Holocaust. That was completely, that guy was a monster. Hitler was a monster for doing that, and I think methamphetamine, he was getting daily doses of methamphetamines for like 10 years, so he just started going bonkers, seriously. That's why he had tremors and developed Parkinson's. But anyway, one thing they should look at with the Holocaust, yes, it was a tragedy. Yes, it shouldn't have happened, but had that not happened, they would not have the state of Israel as it is now. So through that tragedy, something really good came from it, and that is the restoration of their homeland, right? But the one thing I really want to say to the Jews in Israel, and with these conflicts between the Arabs and the Jews, and this has been an ongoing conflict, you guys are arguing over the same thing, okay? You call it different names, but the divine spark is within all of us. It doesn't matter what religion you are, what faith you are, what cultural ethnicity you are. We all have a divine spark within us. So stop seeing somebody of a different culture as a distant stranger to you, and start looking at them as a sentient spiritual being with a soul, the same sentient spiritual being that you have, the same sentient spiritual soul that you have within yourself. So what I really want to say is that things are happening now. There's going to be a new spiritual philosophy. There's going to be a sort of scientific mysticism that's going to be coming about. It's already happening, but it's very slow. And as this progresses, what's going to happen is there's going to be a revelation, a deeper understanding of each individual's faith. So rather than creating a new church or a new organization that can just become corrupt over time, there's going to be a profound inner experience on a collective level. So, just things will get better, but there's no need for these people to be in conflict and at odds with each other. Yes, they've got a lot of cultural baggage, and yes, all that, but they can share that land. It doesn't have to be, this is our land, this is your land. They can work together in brotherhood, and if they do that, then the Middle East can grow to astronomical proportions. Because then they can actually collectivize their resources and start working together as a people rather than as, segmented cultural groups. So that's one thing I'd like to say to the Jews.
Well, and that's a very important thing, and I'm delighted that you actually have offered some of your advice. If people want to get in touch with you, needless to say, Josh And also, Emily, what do they have to do? And is there anything you want to push in terms of your book, and tell people how to get that as well?
Actually, I have a website. So if you go to emilyrosemorgan.com, that's where I have all my books. I have a little blog that happens, and it's a lot of little creative writing things, as well as tips for writing in general, so especially when it comes to fiction. So that's the best way to contact me is through there.
That's wonderful. And what about you, Josh?
I have a number of different sites. They can find me on udemy.com. I've got a few courses on there for free: book distribution, expanded distribution, and an introduction to the analytical psychology of Carl Jung. They can also find me at mylhp.com. That's Lionheart Publishing. And then they can follow me on social media at #Joshua Schmude. So I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as well. So if they want to reach out to me and get advice, or they need some guidance in terms of publishing, reach out to me. I think, Emily, what we should really do is start like a mentoring school. I think we could make some money from that. You know what I'm saying? Because there's always new authors coming onto the field, and I think that they're at a disadvantage because they're getting just a lot of hype and fluff and BS from authors that are claiming they sold all these books and they really didn't. And you can tell just by the advice they give other authors. They're telling them things that, I know from experience, you're not going to sell that many books unless, one, you've got millions of dollars to pour into marketing and get on nationally syndicated shows. And even then, it doesn't guarantee sales. And two, you have to sell to libraries. I mean, this is going to be how you're going to get your start, because once you sell 10,000 copies to libraries or to people, you get on the New York Times bestseller list. And a lot of authors back in the day were buying 10,000 copies of their own book just to get on the list. So there's a lot of chicanery that people don't see behind the scenes in the business world. And once you start realizing that, then you can kind of further your own author career. You have to invest in yourself. You have to invest the money into your own books, into your own career. And eventually it'll pay off, man. It's going to be hard to start. The most difficult part is laying the foundation. But eventually, once the foundation's laid, things start picking up, man. You get in your routine, and it gets easier.
Yeah, the most important thing is that you start.
Yeah,
yep,
exactly.
You just said it. Now, my guests today have been Joshua Schmude and our wonderful new guest, Emily Morgan, who is really starting a business with writing books and getting involved in so many different things. And I really appreciate having both of them on my show. And I want to thank you, Josh, for coming on again, and Emily for, giving us your insight. So thank you very much for being on the Susan Brender Show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to The Susan Brender Show. To be a guest, email sebrender@yahoo.com.